Welcome to The Lumber Word, where industry veterans Matt Beamer, Greg Riley, and Ashley Buckhold dissect the world of commodity lumber each week. We bring you up-to-date insights on supply, demand, and market trends, sharing our trading expertise to benefit everyone in the supply chain. Join us for informative and entertaining discussions that guarantee to make you wiser about all things lumber.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of The Lumber Word, episode number 93. We're recording it on the 19th of September. Pretty excited about today. We've got a guest, first-time guest, new guest to the show, Chris Beard from John Burns Research and Consulting. And if you don't know much about John Burns, I was just telling the fellas here before the show, my first introduction was about 10 years ago. Somebody from there, heck, it may have been John. I can't remember, was up speaking at a convention and showed a screen of U-Hauls leaving states where they were going to, where there were shortages of U-Hauls and where there were too many. And I'm like, holy shit, that is a cool way to look at things differently than all these wonky people get on stage and just say what the group wants to hear, right? And since then, I watch your stuff on social media. I listen to it, and you're really ahead of it. I see a lot of people copy off of what you do. So now everybody puts out U-Haul things, right? And that's which the imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, so to speak. But you guys look at things differently. And why don't you explain?
So right now we have like copycat lumber podcasts. I mean, I know it's a booming segment of commerce. But, I hear it's like all the rage, like lumber podcast. People can't get enough of it.
Yeah, that's true. But they come to this one because of the real information, not the malinformation and misinformation.
That's it. We don't use any AI. We don't use any AI misinformation on this podcast. True.
Or we don't meme anybody.
That's coming next, right, guys?
So Chris, tell us a little bit about John Burns Consulting.
All right. Thanks for having us on, guys. So we have been around in the housing industry, started mostly in new home construction in the early 2000s, very early 2000s. Worked primarily with home builders and land brokers to understand, where new construction was going. As we've evolved over the years, I sit on the building products team, so we've really expanded our reach into building products, which, as you guys know, is not only new construction. You obviously need new building products to go into new homes, but also on the repair and remodel side too. And I think what sets us apart is we talk to a good chunk of the value chain. So, on the building product side, we talk to the building products manufacturers. They're our clients, but they're also, our partners, and we belong to industry associations. We talk to the dealers. We listen to what's going on in the distribution channel from the LBM dealers, distributors, and the two-step process, also with retailers, the home centers. And then also, obviously with the builders, we continue to foster that dialogue with the builders. We have a monthly builder survey that touches about 20% of new home sales each month. So we get like real-time data from them. We do a monthly dealer survey on the LBM side where we get real-time information, sales information, like what are they selling out the door to builders and contractors each month. We have a pretty robust remodeling survey too. So we talk to remodelers, like design build firms, whole home remodelers, and then also, architects and specifiers, what are they putting into the homes? And then we have a New Home Trends Institute that really touches on a lot of consumer trends too. So we like to say that we touch really every part of the housing value chain in the U.S.
So your job there, Chris, or you and I were talking, you travel around to a lot of industry events. The next event you're going to be at is?
I will be presenting in at Glass Build America. So that's part of the window and door industry. We do a quarterly survey with the National Glass Association. We talked about 40 to 50% of the manufacturing volume of that industry each quarter. And so I'm going to deliver an economic keynote there. And then probably my latest next big speech after that is going to be at the Pro Dealer Industry Summit with the National Lumber Building Materials Dealers Association in Savannah. It's the first week of October. So I'll be there too.
That's great. I'm gonna follow up on this at the end too, but let's just at the beginning of this, how do people get a hold of your company to find out more information about the services you provide?
You can follow us on LinkedIn. So it's John Burns Research and Consulting, hashtag JBREC, JBREC. That's probably the easiest way to get to us, jbrec.com, jbrec.com. And we have a contact us link. You can find my contact info on there too if you want to reach out to me directly. But yeah, we put out all of our team, about 150 of us at the company. We put out pretty robust information across most of the channels that we cover. Like I said, I'm primarily building products focused, but the people that do the home builders or the apartment rental side, they'll put out content too and share all that on LinkedIn. So just follow all of us, and that's probably the easiest way to get a hold of us. Your feed will probably be inundated with information from all of us, but it's usually good information.
Really good. I appreciate it. Well, let's jump into the market real quick. Matt and Greg.
We're going to talk housing starts, or
let's just real quick. We're going to go to housing start market. So lumber wise this week, trucking market still seems okay. Lumber, car market, okay. But I've noticed today more offerings from mills that I haven't seen in quite a long time. Actually got some offerings from mills I haven't heard from in over a month, and also saw some mills sending out some list on pricing that had lower numbers that I haven't seen since the Canfor announcement. So there may just be a little bit extra to move this time of the year. Like I said, still a good truck market. Matt, what are you seeing out there?
I was really busy on Monday and Tuesday and even yesterday. And today I'm not as busy, but I surprisingly end up, if I walk out of here today, I'm going to have a decent day. So I feel like the balance between the customers and the mills is kind of 50-50 right now. And I think the mills are just doing, the same thing we talked about last week, where they're having to push 2x4 into the market because there's ample supply of 2x4 dimension. And then the rest of the stuff, the tube 6 and wider, seems to just sort of automatically take care of itself on whatever offerings are out there. So not a lot's changed for me, honestly. It's just it just feels like pushing rope. It's not like we're going anywhere, but we're not really going backwards either. I think the eastern spruce market is maybe a little softer than the western markets are, but I'm not 100% sure. I just hear that from my guys in Chicago who say that the eastern guys are coming in $20 cheaper than the west. And so, that kind of makes sense. The West is where most of the curtailments are taking place, and they're the ones that are struggling, the most with profitability. So I get it. My theory on the market is if 2x4 tune butter wants to get really soft here in the next 3 or 4 weeks, I see that as a real buying opportunity. It happens once in a while, like once a year, once every 2 years, where 2x4 tune butter will get down around 2x4 number 3 type prices, and that's what I'm looking for, right? So if that happens, then it'll just be game on. And I think you just close your eyes and buy as much 2x4 tune butter as you can possibly stomach.
Yeah.
And so, there's my thought on the market. My overall thought on the market is nothing's really going to change here in the short term. It's seasonal weakness. Rallies should be sold. Dips should be bought. And you should perform as an aggressive trader and try to work the margins in between. But if you're just sitting around waiting for some headline to make your business better, you're missing out on a lot of business. There's things going on every day. You just have to work the phones and, pretend like it's a job again. It's not like the lumber and the orders are just flowing right to you. You actually have to do some work on it and compete.
Well, Greg, I didn't want to steal Greg's thunder on this one, but I heard him say something interesting to one of the European mills we had a conference call with this morning. And then I saw inquiry in that. Yeah, we're talking about worst case and best case in the market going forward, right? It looks like the downside is limited. Upside, there's some less lumber out there. It looks like the upside, I don't want to say limited, but it's your risk reward isn't probably being short at this point long term from what we're looking at. So, I mean, Greg, you actually said to them that worst case market was slightly lower to sideways. Best case, sideways.
No. It's sharply sideways.
Sharply sideways.
Sharply sideways.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Sharply sideways. Yeah, I mean, the reality is that no one's building any inventory, and we've gotten a lot closer to supply and demand being in balance, but we're probably not there just yet. And to Matt's point, with the time of the year when you're looking at it going, well, it's too early to start building inventory for Q1, right? So, that means it's probably going to be a little more sloppy here for the next 30 to 45 days or so. And I'm not going to be surprised if we see more curtailment, which will probably be the kind of the final straw in the end of this bear market.
Yeah, it's interesting. Can I put my tinfoil hat on this one?
Sure, show, buddy.
So
yeah, I mean, yeah, sure.
It feels like there's going to be more curtailments. Some you can make an argument out west because of how duty or quota counts. There's probably an incentive for some of them to shut down before the end of the year, and it never stops amazing me how right before the market feels like it's going to tip, it's a slow, steady drip of announcements, right? And I think you're going to just keep hearing that. So as I said, the market probably feels like it's tipping a little bit here. It's a little bit more squishy on some items. That usually is 48 to 72 hours before something comes out or somebody says something. And I'm not talking about the announcement we're just going to shut for 2 weeks, right?
Let's talk about the demand side. I'm so bored with this whole supply side talk. Let's talk demand side.
Well, let's talk monthly new residential construction then. Greg, what do you think?
Chris, you want to talk about housing starts? You want me to?
Well, I can start off. So August numbers, they came in earlier this week and they were up sequentially. Everybody's been kind of waiting for that rate cut, which was announced yesterday, 50 basis point. Our stance on that is, number one, everybody knew it was coming. We didn't know how big. It was between 25 and 50 basis points. And so our take on it is we think that it's probably too late in the year to make an impact on new starts. We've been hearing that from the dealers. We've been hearing that from the builders too. So as you see, like unsold completed inventory has just been creeping up. So it's like the home buyers have been on the sidelines too, because it's like the worst kept secret that rates are going to get cut this week. And so home buying activity has been low. And so now it's more focused on, building down that inventory of completed homes, finished homes before start. So we've seen the dealers were telling us they were seeing pretty slow activity in July and August, and then September, when I last spoke to them last week, halfway through the month, maybe a slight uptick, what they're seeing from the builders, but still relatively slow. And I think you're right, seasonal slowdown's coming. And so, now all eyes are on 2025.
So what do you make of the big completions? Like Greg highlighted that yesterday and walked in the office. He goes, wow, look at the completions. If you go back a year and look at the completions, I mean, they're just accelerating, right?
Yeah, and that's really been a shift focus with the builders is really to get towards completions, to have spec homes, available for sale, move-in ready homes. Builders, especially the large production builders, the nationals, they've been able to do the rate buy downs, and so they have an advantage over the resale market, because if you're a homeowner and you're selling your home, somebody comes to you and says, hey, will you buy down my mortgage rate? You're of course going to say, no, I'm not going to do that. But builders have the flexibility to do that, especially the national production builders that have the financing arm. And so, they've been focused on spec inventory and building that relationship of new home sales, for shifting more towards spec than to be built.
So when I look at, I was on the phone talking to somebody today that was all excited about the rate cuts, and I guess my answer is I don't know, right? I mean, I don't know what it's going to do. But historically, over a long period of time, if I hear people right, that it does have a lag, but it does affect single family homes, right? I guess my question is, there are more public builders now with a larger chunk of that business, less small builders.
Right.
What do you think as we start cutting here? What does your company think? How many cuts are we going to have, and how is that going to affect single family and multifamily housing going through into next year, maybe through next year?
So, you touched on it, the large productions, the nationals, the publics, the publics, I think they've got like almost 50% market share. And so they've been able to, they have the financial flexibility to be able to offer the rate buy downs, and they've been able to get home buyers more off the fence into their homes. The smaller regional local builders have not had that flexibility because they don't have the financial means to be able to offer to as large of an extent those rate buy downs. And so, as rates do come down, We think that there's probably more upside to our starts forecast for next year, because then as mortgage rates come down, that's more of a play for the regional and local builders. So we see a little bit of upside. The Fed yesterday, they said it's going to be, in total, I think they're penciling in 100 basis point cut yet this year. So they did 50 yesterday. So that would imply a further, 50, either 225s or whatever that ends up looking like. The thing is, the mortgage rates have been coming down for several weeks now anyway, in anticipation of the rate cuts, and that hasn't really moved traffic a ton. So you're right, there is a lag effect with interest rates, and so we'll just have to see when that kicks in. Like I said earlier, I think that we're probably a little bit too late to have a material impact in 2024. But then,
Chris, the thing that I find interesting about when I look at the mortgage rate, I look at the yield curve, and a normal yield curve is an sloping yield curve where short-term rates are lower, long-term rates are higher. We've been in an inverted yield curve now for the last 24 months. And I think I look and, we had an economist, Brian Westbury, on, who's kind of been on regularly. And, he and I are of the opinion it's like, so the real rate of interest is inflation plus a half, 1.5, something in that. I usually just go, it's inflation plus 1, right? So that would imply to me that, ultimately the Fed's probably going to get short-term rates down to, if they hit their 2% target, they'll be at 3. And if, they don't get there, maybe they're at 3.5. But I look at that and I go, well, but the 10-year in that scenario should be higher than it is today, and that mortgage rates would be higher than they are today in, a healthy interest rate yield curve scenario. So, I just kind of look at the whole interest rates are not the thing that's going to substantially change the housing demand picture. Yes, it's going to have some impact to a degree, but I just think it's more, people have to get used to these things and used to these prices for interest rates. And it's really the price of houses that needs to recalibrate.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's how we think about it too. So, interest rates are what they are. And so we have a conference every year for our clients in New York. And we had a speaker last year that said, the issue isn't the 5% Fed funds rate. The issue is the 0% Fed funds rate before that, right? So people got used to really low mortgage rates, 2.5%, 3%, 3 to 4%. And that lock-in effect is real, right? So if you've got a mortgage rate below 4, you're going to think about whether you're going to assume a higher mortgage rate, even if you may want a new home. But that lock-in effect is real. Now, as rates come down, we expect the effect of that to wane. And so as rates come down lower, people say, all right, you know what? I'm not going into a 7% mortgage. I'm maybe going into a 5% mortgage. That's right. A little more palatable, right? But that's why we've also called for stronger growth in repair and remodeling, because that lock-in effect and people staying in their homes longer because they've got a 2.5%, 3% mortgage and don't want to take on a higher rate. So, they'll fix up and do remodeling to their home once financing costs ease. But yeah, affordability in housing in general is absolutely the name of the game here. And building products pricing, if you just look at PPIs, is up 40% since 2019. Lumber has come down, as you guys well know, went up, went down, went back up, and went back down again. But like finished goods, like things like windows and drywall and roofing and all the other things that go into home, we haven't seen any price deflation in those categories, and we don't really expect price deflation.
You're not gonna, right? You're not gonna. What's your read on where repair and remodeling is year to date in terms of like a percentage?
We think we break out repair and remodeling into what we'll call like big ticket discretionary. So those are like large remodeling projects, things over 30K, things that will oftentimes require financing. Then we'll do medium-sized projects, then small and mini projects. Mini is like your dishwasher breaks and you got to fix that, and that's you're easily dropping $1,000 on that type of repair. Big ticket remodeling has been soft, down double digits in the first half of the year. As we came into 2024, we thought that we would start to see a rebound in big ticket remodeling in the second half of this year, just because, coming into this year, the Fed signaled 3 rate cuts, they penciled it in, and we thought, by mid-year they're going to start. And so, homeowners with huge levels of home equity would start to tap into that when HELOC rates weren't at 9%, and then we would start to see some of that unlocking. That obviously hasn't transpired until yesterday. And so we've actually pushed our forecast for big ticket project like improvement, like think about room additions, major kitchen remodels, et cetera, those things that cost a lot of money, push that out into very late in the year and possibly even into 2025. I think the demand is there. It's just a matter of, affordability and cost of capital and how people are going to pay for it.
I have a question for the group. Going back to the discussion on the Fed 50 point cut yesterday, we had talked about the likelihood of the Fed dropping rates, going back 6 months ago. And I recall that we thought that would be a sign of a recession, and that wouldn't necessarily be good for lumber if people are, struggling to pay their bills and borrowing money and all, and, just the country's maybe not doing as well as we thought economically. But then I look at all the economic reports that are coming out here in the last few weeks, and they seem pretty bullish. They seem pretty positive. So I don't know what to believe. You guys have any thoughts on the direction of our economy in general? Are we in a recession? Brian Westbury has been predicting that for a year, but then it hasn't appeared to materialize yet. But this 50 point basis cut makes me question my own sanity. What are your thoughts?
So I'm in the camp that we're not in a recession, and the reason I say that is, number one, we still have GDP growth. So the Fed is still expecting full year 2024 GDP growth. I think they said 2%. Employment market is softening, but there's still more hires. Like the economy is gaining jobs every month. Workforce participation is up, and the working age population is the highest it's been, in several decades. And a lot of that's fueled by immigration too. We have had a big wave of immigration coming in last year and this year that's helped or added to the workforce, if you will.
I've heard about that, yeah.
I've heard about that one too.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But, and consumer spending is up, right? Consumers are still spending, and remarkably, at least at the end of the second quarter, it looks like the excess savings from COVID have not yet completely been depleted. So yeah, we see, but then we see conflicting things like, credit card debt ratcheting up, starting to see a little bit more delinquencies and loan payments. So you're right, it's conflicting signals. But, what to me was the most telling was Powell's remarks yesterday. And it seems clear, he indicated that, at the last FOMC meeting, but indicating that, CPI inflation is becoming less of a focus. It still is, but the dual mandate of, minimize inflation, or inflation target of 2%, and then maximize employment. And so that shift is definitely towards maximizing employment now.
So Matt, my response is, I'm trying to make this a non-political response. You saw
is that possible?
Well, you saw a big labor union didn't actually come out and endorse the Republican candidate yesterday, but a majority of the people in their union are supporting him, right? That hasn't happened in how many presidential elections?
Since Dukakis.
Yeah. So I think if you look at, are you in a recession? What do they say? It's a recession if your neighbor loses their job? I'm not sure how that goes.
No, it's a recession if your neighbor loses a job. It's a depression if you lose yours.
So I think you're kind of having you're having a wider gap between the haves and the have-nots. I think if you don't have a big stock portfolio, 401k, and you're working a day job and all that, and you're going and buying groceries and filling your car up with gas, you probably feel like you're in a recession. If you're one of the lucky few that have a nice 401k and have a good job, trading lumber, you probably don't feel like you're in a recession, right? So I think it's kind of moved to different things. I'm sure the whole economy doesn't feel like that to everybody, but some people sitting there probably feel that way.
Yeah, and we've actually heard from the professional remodeling companies too, like the design build firms and the whole home remodelers. There's definitely a bifurcation in the market. So in the high end, these major room additions, major remodels, those projects are getting bigger, and those projects are still relatively strong. People that just have the cash on hand to do that, whereas kind of the smaller and medium-sized projects, they've been suffering a little bit. Pipeline's been a little bit low, and so you're right. I won't say the haves or the have-nots, but kind of is, right. We've definitely seen that bifurcation in the market, and you hear the manufacturers talk about that too, like luxury building products, really high end. They've really been outperforming, and kind of like the middle of the road stuff is starting to suffer, and then necessary repairs where definitely seeing trade downs in lower quality material just because of affordability for things that have to be done.
Well, like I'm in the process of remodeling my underground bunker right now, and I'm spending a lot of money on it, so it's going really well.
Ash, you came into my office and highlighted something that about refinancing, and we had a discussion about it, and I kind of looked up the numbers, and I think the number that I came out was from 2004 to 2008 that consumers pulled something like $2.5 trillion out of their home equity. Chris, I'd love for you to if you can verify that number or corroborate it. But when I look at the existing home equity that people hold right now, it is at an all-time record high. People that own a house, no matter where it is, are very house rich, and there is a huge amount. And I mean, I guess I'm looking. The next big boom is as short-term rates fall and people can tap into that. That's going to be something that's going to be really amazing to look at.
You believe that money will be spent
equity now as there was in the early 2000s.
So you believe that money is going to get borrowed and spent on improvements? Or just?
I guess that's the question. Is it going to happen?
If I listen to my Tom Selleck ad, a reverse mortgage is not right for everyone, but it could be right.
I mean, I'm at a point, Greg, where we're having these discussions. My wife and I are discussing, what are we going to do in the next 3 years? Because I'm going to be an empty nester here in 3 years, and I don't need a huge house. I've got a house that fits 6 people, and I've got 3 people living in it right now, soon to be 2. So what are we going to do with the money? And we could go spend we could spend some of the home equity that we have if we chose to. I have no interest in doing that. You got to get
through those college tuitions first, buddy.
Nah, I'm not going to borrow against my house to pay for college. That would be like the worst financial. You're fired, okay? So, anyways,
not a good strategy.
The point that I'm trying to make is that while there might be plenty of home equity in people's coffers, I'm not so sure that people are in a big hurry to spend that money. And a lot of people, the people like you and me, are the ones that are benefiting the most because we're older and we've owned real estate for 30 or 40 years. And so we've had this time for all this money to sort of just pile up in our piggy banks. And now it's like, do I want to go buy a bigger house? No. I mean, I just want to cash out, pay cash for my next house, and take whatever's left over and throw it in a CD or some municipal bonds or something, where it's just going to sit there and make money for me on the sidelines.
Matt, I'll tell you what my wife said when we became empty nesters is she looked at me and she said, honey, you're going to have to become a lot more interesting. And I said, or I could just play more golf.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are.
I'm no more interesting, but I do play more golf.
I mean, I'm in the same boat too. Our youngest just started college last year, and we're sitting here in beautiful Iowa in a 5-bed, 4-bath house. And my wife and I are empty nesters too. Why? Because we have a 2.5% mortgage rate. So we're in the same thing. But to your point about home equity, if you bought a home before 2019. You've got, more likely than not, no matter where you are in the country, you've got a substantial amount of home equity just because of the price appreciation that we've seen, since COVID. And so, at the end of the first quarter, I think our calculation is like $374,000 on average, just in equity. That's everybody all in. But the other fundamentals that we talk about a lot is, you think about the last housing boom that you guys were certainly a part of, early 2000s. Those homes, and pre-GFC, those homes are all 20 plus years old now. So they need fixing up. Like, they need new windows. They may already have new roofs on them, but they're going to need new remodeling. And we also think that it's not like we have an oversupply of housing in this country. We think that we're undersupplied in housing units for rent and for sale by about 1.5 million. And so just with the household formations, we talked a little bit about immigration, household formations, like that deficit is still there. So
if we have a shortage of 1.1 million and we need to build, I think the number that I've heard is we need to build, like, kind of our break even is 1.5 million based on scrapage, household formation, immigration. That would imply that you'd need to build 1.7 million for like 7 years to get back to even.
Yeah, I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head. It maybe actually
I made those up.
But yeah,
if you listen
right.
to me, I make this shit up.
I wasn't going to say it that explicitly, but yeah, I kind of. But you're right. I mean, even if Matt, you do downsize, and there's going to be demand for your house, right? And so it's a matter of, if you're an empty nester, if you've got repairs to be done, either you're going to do them before you sell, or the buyer's going to do them before after they move in. So we think that demand is absolutely there, and you're going to cash out with equity and pay cash for your next house, which may be smaller, but it's also more expensive than your current house. So you may not have as many savings to invest as you think, or put in a CD, but the fact that the work still needs to get done, right? The demand is still going to be there.
Yeah, I'm actually going to buy a double wide and move out into like the hinterlands and just get a Starlink satellite link. And
maybe you should move out next to Kid Rock in Nashville or something. That'd be
well,
good.
Matt,
I'm going to move out to Iowa. I heard real estate's cheap out there.
That's the redneck dream, Matt. Matt, that's what the redneck dream is, don't you? It's
What's
a house on wheel and a car on blocks. So Chris, one thing I noticed from going and visiting houses over the weekend that are 10 times the size of my current house, I've gone through a bunch of open houses and they're empty now. And the real estate agents, I'm like, why are these houses empty? They're like, well, more people now are moving for jobs. So the job market, you saw where Amazon talked about they want people back in the office now. And 2 to 3 real estate people actually said, corporate America has started paying to relocate people again and want to relocate them. Is that anything that you've heard about at all?
Yeah, we're starting to see that. We're starting to see more companies say full-time return to office. You pointed out Amazon.
Yeah.
The Bay Area's been that way. New York City's been that way for a while too. Definitely more instances of that. So it seems like the leverage is shifting more towards the employer than the employee for a large number of companies. And so folks that were able to move away more further away in these more expensive environments are having to come back in many instances. So that is causing. I don't know. I haven't looked too much into the corporate relo, how that's ticking back up. Obviously that was a big thing pre-2020.
Yeah.
But that's interesting because those homes are available, and then if you've got the corporation selling the home on behalf of the employee that they're having to move, right? What is that going to do for prices too? Don't know.
That's right,
Chris. So I just had one question about multifamily. So multifamily completions are up 36% year to date. The units under construction are now down 15% from last year. Yeah, and starts are down 32%. Yep. What's your forecast for multifamily? And because one of the things I was thinking about is that maybe the biggest beneficiary of the lower interest rates is going to be multifamily builders.
That's a great point. And so multifamily starts are down 30-ish% this year. That's kind of what our forecast came in at too. We're thinking it's going to be, high single digits. Multifamily starts up high single digits next year, but off a really, really low base, like the lowest base that we've seen, even pre-2015, I think. So off a really low base. Obviously as rates come down, a lot of multifamily developers, they've got variable rates and how they finance it too. So, when rates come down, that's good news for them. And multifamily is also market by market. There's some markets that have just been overbuilt with multifamily. Some of the Sunbelt markets are that way, where there's almost a little bit too much supply. So starts there it's going to be different than in other parts of the country. Rents have been flattish but holding up. We didn't see a big decline in rents, maybe as large as we anticipated, and so then deals may start to pencil as rates come down.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out, because there's a lot of balls in the air right now when it comes to the big picture in terms of housing, whether it's single family, multifamily, repair and remodel. We have an election coming up. We've got all kinds of stuff like cross currents. And I will say this, though, what we're seeing, back to lumber a little bit. I've had some discussions here in the last week or so since the Canfor announcement, and it's having a trickle down effect on supply. So we're being asked to re-quote contracts for the end of the year. So I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, can you cover this contract for the next 3 months? Because obviously that got canceled by one of the Canfor mills, and so now they need a new supplier for it. I've had one fairly substantial customer extensively question me about contracts going into 2025, whereas a month ago that wasn't even on the table. weren't talking about it at all. I feel like there's a tensioning up in the supply side on contract obligations and premium lumber for 2025. So because Canfor is a really big supplier of Home Depot and Lowe's type product, that's a big part of their business. And if they're losing production, then it's got to be found somewhere else, right? And so we're going to get those phone calls. Greg and Ashley, you're going to get those phone calls. I find it interesting, as an observer here. What are your thoughts on that going into next year, Greg and Ashley?
So Matt, I've heard already that people that hold the contracts, that sold the contracts, the mills are saying on the min max for Q3 or Q4, we're only going to give you the min, and we're not even talking about next year right now. They're like, that's what I hear they're saying, right? And we're getting those calls now. We're selling stuff. Greg mentioned last podcast, we had some things that weren't on contract that are now on contract, and multiple people called us on it. Happened again today with our 2x3s, right? Yeah, I mean, and I think Chris mentioned the fact when we had an email going back and forth. He goes, you can't comment on the real time pricing, but he said, you said lumber dealers reported selling more lumber last month, more board feeds than they thought. What do you think of lumber? Well, Matt's question, I'm trying to morph that into a question for Chris too, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, what they told us, board feet throughout most of this year was flattish, maybe up slightly. And August was the first month that, as an aggregate, they said it was down slightly, so down a couple percent in board feet. It's like you said, it's like a bunch of balls in the air as to what the outlook is for next year. More upside than downside probably as we sit here today. You just look at the futures. The futures have been indicating higher demand, higher pricing into next year too. I don't have the real-time prices like you guys do, but the futures market certainly seems to be planning that in too.
Not as big a premium as I'd like it to be, Chris. I'd like it to be a bigger premium for next year. I mean, that's not because I'm greedy. I'm just, Hey, Ash, do you want to share with our listeners what you've picked up in the weeds on low-grade lumber?
So I was just talking so I don't know, Chris, if you follow any of the industrial type of lumber too, or industrial manufacturers in the lumber space.
Not really, no.
I've been talking to a few people, and the way Greg and I really lift our antennas to it is we sold our 2x4 12-foot no grade stamp, all of them down there in the Cape, right? And we're like, they've been sitting there for a month or so and nothing. And then talking to a handful of people in the industrial space, people that sell to people that make pallets or crating or packaging. The feedback I'm getting is a lot of their customers that then load these pallets with whatever they load them with that puts on a choo-choo train or a truck and goes around the North America. They weren't worried about low prices for lower grade lumber. Your utilities economy is number 3. So they priced a lot of their product based on Q3 pricing. And now they're coming in, and guess what? Low grade's a little bit harder to buy. And it seems to have pushed the price of low grade. And when the price of low grade gets pushed up, kind of everything can kind of start moving along with it. Is that kind of what you heard me say, Greg? I can't remember exactly how I framed it this morning.
I did hear you say that. Yes.
Okay.
And I said, well, I guess that makes sense given when you cut production, you don't run to make low grade. So
you don't want to ship low grade across the border with a 14% duty also.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. It's the first thing. That's the first thing to, and I guess it makes sense if you think about it, Matt. The low grade and the high grade, the things that are tightening up first, which leads me back to that
for different reasons, right?
Right, but what brings me back to that, like we're a lot closer to equilibrium right now than maybe it feels.
I had one question for Chris, and I'm kind of going back because repair and remodel, which consumes the most lumber, as we all know, in North America, it always seems to be the biggest lag of information and finding out when it's moving. Maybe because we're not looking at the real-time information or not as tied in. We see it because of the product being offered that normally isn't offering to us and different other things going on. Chris, how is the lag, or how quickly can like John Burns keep up on the supply-demand equilibrium and repair and remodel? Is there a lag on that, or how tight can you guys follow that?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a lag that's inherent. So, like I said, we talk pretty much constantly with remodeling contractors and see what's going on and see what it's in their pipeline. And when we talk to the building materials dealers, so the LBM dealers that are shipping the stuff out the door every day, we ask them of their customer type too. So they'll break it down by like a remodeling contractor or just a roofing or window contractor. So we have good visibility into the demand by those customer types, and then we can also say, all right, what are they buying? How much lumber are these guys buying? This is something that we've wrestled with a lot too, is like the types of lumber. Like, if you're doing a kitchen remodel, odds are you're probably not using a lot of dimensional. You might be using some panels if you need to. If you're replacing the subfloor, okay, there might be some panels that you're using there. But then like big things like room additions, and you think about where OSB was early this year too, and we struggled with that too. Like, why is OSB pricing going up so significantly when dimensional wasn't doing anything? And so we asked around and heard a lot. It was really interesting to get this commentary from the dealers. They were saying, well, a lot of it's roof repair, like they were replacing the decks on the roof from hail damage that we saw last year. So that was a thing that moved OSB a little bit. I think it was in March, April timeframe before they came back down. As far as the lumber that goes through R&R, it's a little bit of a challenge, but we just try and triangulate that based on the customers that we talk to.
So I have a theory. Ash, on why it's so hard to put your finger on it, in that all of that lumber moves from producer to the home centers with no price transparency, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're price takers. They let the rest of the market set the price, and then they take whatever that is. And like you're saying with mins and maxes, we've seen this before, where it is a lag, and it's hard to put your finger on it because of that. Whereas if they were in the market actively buying or not buying, you would be able, that would send more of a signal to the market about what that underlying demand is.
Yeah, that's a great theory. I like that.
That's why you guys have me on the show, because we do a lot of that stuff. I can tell you as close to real time as you're going to get.
Yeah.
Hey, let's do the heaven and hell segment,
buddy.
buddy.
Seat right now. I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm sitting right here on the edge.
Just real quick, Chris, what is your projections for next year, if I missed it, for single family, multifamily total housing starts?
We think that single family housing starts are going to be up in the mid single digit range. So we're thinking, in 4 to 5% for single family starts. Multifamily, we're thinking high single digits for multifamily starts.
So what's your year-end 2024 housing start number?
We have year-end single family down 1.
No. I'm saying, like, what is your nominal number for 2023 housing starts total?
2024.
2024. I'm sorry, 2024. Yeah.
2024. Let me look here real quick. 136.
136 versus 142 last year. So total's going to be down. What is that? Yeah. So total for the year, we're exactly where we are right now. Year to date, we're down 4% total. Single family up 10, multifamily down. Actually, units 2 to 4 year to date are up 41%. It's interesting. I mean, it's a relatively small number, right? But
Chris, and then the other question is, where are the U-Hauls leaving and where are they going to?
You asked me that, you posed that, and a smart person probably would have looked that up ahead of time, but I didn't do that. So I'd have to get back to you on that.
Well, so where are the bright spots? I shouldn't say, where are the cities that are overvalued and where are the cities that are undervalued right now, housing wise?
We're starting to hear some weakening in the Sun Belt, like Florida, Texas, a little bit of oversupply there, and they were like later to the game to get to the downturn, right? So as the rest of the country was kind of experiencing this in 2023, those markets were still going pretty good, and so we're starting to see some weakness there. But obviously it's still where migration is, and that's Sun Belt regions.
You know where I would go if I was a young kid, Ashley? I think I'd move to Indianapolis, Indiana. You can buy a house relatively cheap there, and there's lots of jobs, and lots of young people have moved there over the years. And that'd be a good place to start your life out and build some equity and get a. You'd have to put up with a rough winter, but if you want to start your life off not being financially strapped to your house and cash poor, then a place like that.
I think
Indianapolis. I've been to Indianapolis, and it's actually kind of a cool city.
I think people got in front on that one because I saw, Matt, where two of the biggest cities where prices are moving higher, Fort Wayne, Indiana, is one, and Indianapolis is one that the prices. So people saw the value and started.
You know what? One thing that we never talked about, and you just brought up a really good point. We never talked about the ripple effect of the COVID years, of what it's done to real estate in places that were heretofore unheard of. Like, for example, Western Montana. I just was up there a week and a half ago. I was driving up to Glacier National Park, and I'm driving through this beautiful countryside. It looks like Eastern Oregon, a lot of farm and ranch stuff. Everything up there is inflated value because the wealthy people have moved in. They've discovered northern Idaho, they've discovered eastern Washington, they've discovered western Montana. Idaho's growing like a weed. Utah's been growing like a weed. Colorado's growing like a weed, and it's a lot of it was the remote work thing. So people are like, I don't want to live in San Francisco anymore. I'm just going to cash out and go buy something over in Denver. I wonder if people will move back, or if they'll just tell Amazon, no, I'm not coming in 5 days a week. Sorry, I quit. It'll be interesting to see what the tug of war does and how that impacts these areas of the country that have benefited from mobility.
Yeah, I mean, I think the percentage of workers working remotely is pretty much stabilized since 2022. And so, yeah, you've got the Amazon announcement, but then you've got, a lot of companies that are just saying, it's been working out for the past couple of years, so we'll just leave it. I think it's
the only people I needed those companies to move back into the office are the people at customer support. Because what's happened to me over the COVID years, I used to call somebody at customer support and I'd talk to them and everything was cool. I understood what they were talking about, and I'd hang up my phone and it'd be resolved. Now I have to call and get a call back 40 minutes later, and it's somebody that really isn't ever excited to hear from me or nor wants to help me if I can understand what anybody's talking about. So just as long as the customer service move back to all these companies, that's all I care about.
Yeah, that was the same thing as like some of those trucking calls that you've been taking in the office.
I took some messages for you. Greg and I are doing the trucking this week, and I can generally get the name and a phone number. I don't know any of the other stuff, but it is what it is. Well, boys, we're 52 minutes into it. We could do the married date dump segment, but I think my stuff wouldn't change from last week.
I think we should wrap it here. This has been great. Chris, is awesome having you.
Yeah.
I think we could I think we could peel the onion back deeper if you'd come back on.
Chris, you should be a little bit more prepared next time.
You're gonna have to have the U-Haul information though.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'm disappointed you didn't have that right on the tip of your tongue. You better study up next time, Chris.
I know. I'm sure I'm going to hear about it too back at the office.
And hey, Chris, two things.
Yeah, but you don't have to be back there until next Wednesday, so it's okay. No.
What's the John Burns website people can go to also?
It is jbrec.com, jbrec.com, stands for John Burns Research and Consulting.
And the second question is, I thought that was a tree on the picture behind you, but it is a
dancer. Some artwork that my wife and I picked up many years ago in Montreal when we happened to be up there.
I love it.
It's really nice, actually.
It's cool. That's cool.
For our listening audience, it's really cool.
Yeah.
Very colorful.
It'll
Too
show up.
bad you can't see it.
Everyone. I know you guys. I know how much you guys love my backdrop.
Your backdrop.
All right,
looks
guys.
Great. All right, everybody.
This is great. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Lumber Word. The Lumber Word podcast is dedicated to engaging conversations about the lumber industry, including trading ideas, market trends, and evaluations of overvalued and undervalued assets. We wish to emphasize that the discussions and opinions expressed in this podcast are purely for informational and entertainment purposes. They should not be considered as financial or investment advice. We encourage our listeners to make their own financial decisions, taking into account their unique circumstances and financial goals, and to seek professional financial advice if necessary.